All right, Guy, welcome to the show, and thanks for your willingness to turn the camera on. That was something I didn't quite prepare you for.
Yeah,
but
you didn't at all prepare me for. In fact, you told me it wasn't going to be video. No, I really I enjoy kind of the spontaneity of it. So definitely,
yeah, let's the mirror neurons fly, right? I mean, it's definitely gives us a lot more visual information to work with, besides just having our audio. But yeah, I appreciate you being up for the video element today. So I'm excited to have you on, man. And I've actually known about you for a number of years, which was so funny when you reached out, and I'm like, of course I'd love to have you on. Awesome. I've been kind of following you along and seeing like the evolution of your work and your podcast, and it's just been really neat to see. So for those who don't know kind of what you've been up to or what you do, can you kind of fill us in and start there?
Of course. So, you're referring to my podcast, I think the Trauma Therapist podcast. I have, I started a site, the Trauma Therapist Project, a couple years back to really support and inspire trauma therapists and to bring an awareness of trauma. I was, I was in school, I was training, I was doing my training in graduate school, and I knew I was always interested in trauma. And do you want me to just keep going here?
Yeah, this is great.
Okay.
And this is stuff that I don't know either.
Okay. So, I was doing my different practicum and my pre-doc internships and so forth. And I started taking this trauma course, a sensory motor psychotherapy course. Pat Ogden started sensory motor psychotherapy, and just blew me away. My brother had come back from Iraq as a Navy SEAL, just jacked up with PTSD, and I didn't know what to do. And I was like doing everything the wrong way. I was just pestering him and, trying to force him to talk and everything. And then when I got out of school, I got a job, which I had been working at in the last 5 years at a clinic in California. And we were seeing us kind of assessing and working with kids who were showing early signs of psychosis. And not surprisingly, there's a lot of trauma there. And part of the job, John, is taking these calls from teachers and parents and so forth, referral calls, right? And you're doing these, got this hair on my eyebrow. You've got these, you're doing a phone screen and you're finding out what's going on. And 99.9% of the time, there's trauma.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. And you're like, finally, I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then, so you have, at the end of the call, you've got this screen with all these crazy symptoms going on. And then, a week later, the kid walks in, and it's this little kid. It's just like, it's this normal looking kid, normal kid. But all this other stuff has happened to them, which inevitably, and of course, it's not always a direct line, but for the most part, that's really what started it. And I was like, and then at the same time, really, I was doing a lot of commuting too. So, and I was always thinking about my clients, what wasn't I doing? What should I have been doing? I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I was listening to this podcast, not necessarily mental health podcasts, but other podcasts, business podcasts. Sure. These people being interviewed with these entrepreneurs doing amazing things with their lives. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if I started my own podcast and I had like a seasoned therapist there beside me? And this one thing came after the other. I'd never started a podcast, and so anyway, that was kind of
such a fascinating journey, right? So from picking up on trauma, where it was likely to be overlooked, to realizing that there's a lot more you could do with your learnings about trauma, and also, it's amazing you just kind of became this entrepreneur along the way, right?
That's what happened. You're opening up a lot of doors here.
Yeah.
But it's true, and a lot of different threads of my what I like to think of my strengths or my passions come into play with this with this project and the work I'm doing now. So,
did you do something before becoming a therapist?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I graduated high school, I went to Philadelphia College of Art, which was Philadelphia College of Art, probably now 25 years ago. And then I dropped out after a year. So, and then I was out of school for, 18 years. So during that time, I was playing music, and then I was writing fiction. And then, what happened was I was writing fiction. I was working on this book that I never got published. This was in Los Angeles, and I was sitting down at the end of the day. It was really quiet, and I got this phone call, and it turned out to be this woman I had worked with in San Francisco a couple years prior, and we had kind of lost contact, but she was calling all of her friends to tell them that she'd been living with AIDS for 9 years. Right. And basically she was calling people to say goodbye. And I was like, you get this call and you're like, holy crap, what is going on here? This woman, John, had so much strength and composure and courage in the way that she was dealing with this. I got off the phone and I was like, there's no way I have that strength. But I had been writing about that type of kind of inner strength. And at that point, I was like, I need to find that in myself. And that kind of led me on these different adventures and courses to really find that for myself. And during one of these courses, which was a survival course, one of the guys got really sick, one of the other members. And I, myself and this other member carried this guy and tried to help this guy. And that was the moment, like, this is what I want to do. Wow. With my life. I want to help people in these kind of dire situations.
Sure. Talk about how what you're doing now is an extension of that, right? Because you got into this to help people, and now you also, you help therapists be better trauma therapists. So how what's it like to be in this realm now, and how do you stay connected to that original kind of inspiration?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's kind of like the magic question because, for me, I think as I just feel like I'm doing what I know I'm doing what I love doing, but I feel like I'm doing what I should be doing, which is I'm not doing therapy now. I was doing therapy. But I'm kind of like bringing people together and getting in there, kind of like you're doing now. You're asking these really good questions that are opening up all these like little doors. And I love doing that. And, when I was kind of going back to grad school and my one of my internships, you see trauma all around. And a lot of clinicians, for whatever reason, it's kind of trauma's like the hot potato.
Sure.
It's like we all kind of know it's there, and it's really difficult for a lot of people to handle. And for me, it certainly was. And that just became something that I wanted to get in there and do, because I was the people that I'm helping now or trying to help was me. I was that person.
Sure.
I wanted to do it, but didn't know how to do it. And so I've ended up interviewing all these people who have had that experience too. They just start and they don't know what the heck they're doing, and things evolve.
I'm just really curious to ask you this because, I see a very small handful of clients myself now, which, was a transition, right? From going from being a therapist full time. When I lived in San Francisco, I don't know if you know this about me, but I lived out there and I had a practice in San Francisco, and I worked for agencies out there for a number of years. So I was just a therapist, for many years until transitioning into this other world of podcasting and running an online business and digital marketing and branding and all this craziness. So, but something I realized actually, when I arrived to Charlotte was that I didn't really have something concrete to offer my trauma clients. And I didn't name myself as a trauma therapist, but inevitably, as you know, and as all therapists know, it ends up in the room, right? And it can look like a lot of different things. And so something I did when I got here is I went and got EMDR trained, which has been really wonderful and just gave me that sense of like, okay, I finally have a tool or something to offer rather than just sitting there and having the client relive the horrible, unthinkable shit that happened. And then as a therapist going, that sounds really hard. And inside, you're going, I don't know what else to do with this. And now the client's walking out of the session completely dysregulated and they're no better off. In fact, they might be a little worse, right? Because it's not necessarily helpful to just have them sit there and relive it. You know what I mean? So I forgot what my question was, but my question is like, it's important to have something to offer trauma, clients with trauma. If you don't have something like that to offer, what do you recommend for a therapist, or like where can they start, or should they crack that door open with clients if they're not really ready to kind of work through the trauma?
That's an awesome question. And I'm not going to say the answer, but certainly one of the answers is kind of just what you're alluding to, and that it's going to come in the room.
Yeah.
And knowing that, giving that, it's a therapist's duty to be informed. Yeah. And it's not always going to look like, you're not always going to have some combat veteran walking in your room or someone's been smacked by a Mack truck, but it can come in the forms, it may look like depression or anxiety. It have that flavor to it. And it's just simply getting educated. That's part of it. The other part is knowing that it's the work that the trauma worker does on him or herself.
Right.
That's a big part of it too, because as one of my guests said, a lot of my guests have said, clients know if you can quote unquote take it.
If you can handle it.
They're always, if you can handle it.
Yeah.
And if they think you can't, they're not going to open up.
Right.
So a big part of this equation and the relationship is, as a therapist, as a counselor, whatever, being able to sit with that. And that requires you or all the listeners, everyone who's doing this stuff, to hold up the mirror to themselves and say, okay, what about my presence, my level of authenticity, my willing to sit, my willing to hear? Mm-hmm. When I first decided to pursue this path, to get a degree, again, I knew I wanted to do trauma, but I was scared about what I thought kids might say. Hearing all the crazy trauma stories, that scared the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. And then as I became more experienced, not that it doesn't, but you just learn and you're able to sit with. So that's a big piece of it too.
Yeah. We end up being exposed to some pretty unthinkable stories as therapists. And again, whether you're a trauma therapist or not, and I was thinking through this the other day, again, with the few clients I do see. I'm actually doing some trauma work right now with a couple folks. And sometimes it just strikes me, right, that we're in this position to hear about people doing unthinkable things to other people, and somehow we have to make sense of that for ourselves. And your worldview is going to be tested accordingly, right? And I don't know, what thoughts do you have on that in terms of like just being exposed to all this darkness and also trying to still see light in the world and trying to not be jaded and trying to not be paranoid, every time you step out of the house, knowing that a lot of bad shit happens to people every day.
Yeah. You're right on the money. And that's one of the really difficult challenges of that work specifically. The other side to that, though, is the knowledge that people get better. Yeah, people can get better. But it's also your, the ability that you have to sit with someone or to just witness, trauma takes away, completely robs people, steals people of kind of an ownership and belief in themselves. And when you as a therapist are able to sit there and let them know, either verbally or non-verbally, that it's okay, that it's safe, that in and of itself is so powerful. And it's, again, just having that presence, being able, willing to sit there and listen to that, that in and of itself is healing. Yeah. That's exactly what that person didn't have in the first place. Yeah. But to answer specifically that part of the darkness, that's where, we use the term self-care or self-nourishment, and those words are, I think we throw them around so easily. But yeah, exactly. But it's so important to consult with other people, to talk to other people, and to say, Guy, man, I just had this client. Oh my God, you need to do that. That's gonna happen. And also to have, I know a lot of people who don't just see, quote unquote trauma clients. Sure. You're going to go nuts. Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah. So part of it is not feeling like you have to have it all figured out or know it all, or even when you've been in the game for many years, it's knowing, to kind of lean on other therapists. That's definitely a big part of it. And realizing like there's still a lot we don't know about trauma, right? And even with all the additional research coming out, or even brain studies coming out, there's still a lot we don't know about how it disrupts one's system and also the process to getting better.
Right. And it's this, I think too, when you said figuring it out or knowing it all, that's a big piece too, because there's a lot of, especially when people are working with trauma, there's a lot of or I should say, taking off that clinical hat in a sense, and not assuming the air or the idea that we do know it all. We don't, and then you're talking about giving back to the client their sense of ownership and meaning, allowing them to find out or to ascribe meaning to this thing. That's a big part of it. Because a lot of times, that's you use the word, worldview is completely disrupted. And that's what happens. And part of the healing, large part of the healing, is rediscovering or reattributing a meaning to what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm really curious to ask you about some other stuff. And also, given that a lot of what we talk about on the show is business building, practice building, and entrepreneurship, and why do you think you've been successful?
You have to define success, man. I don't know. I mean, I think I've had I can tell you I get a lot of emails from people who really get a lot out of what I'm doing in that sense. That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, I love it. I love what I'm doing. I try to be as open and honest as I can when I'm doing what I'm doing. Sure.
It's a tough one,
I don't
right?
think that's. Yeah, it's a tough question.
Let me ask you this, because I think it's relevant. And I see a lot of therapists out there, or entrepreneurs or whatever, trying to differentiate themselves in very saturated markets of any kind, right? Whether it's I'm trying to start a podcast on couples therapy, or I'm trying to be the couples therapist in my town. And there ends up being a lot of competition for like the top 3 slots, and where those three people are all trying to do the same thing. My guess is that in part for you, it was kind of creating this category of podcast, or creating the Trauma Therapist Project, right? And creating something new that people really needed that wasn't already kind of in contention, right? Or you know what I mean? Like there was
first to market.
That's part of it. That and doing it well. But
I think that, go ahead.
You weren't trying to compete with, you weren't looking at another therapist, or trauma therapist podcast and saying, let me try to beat that person, right? Or let me try to be number 2 or number 1 in that category.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I was commuting, and I was commuting like an hour and a half each way and listening to all these podcasts, there wasn't a trauma podcast that I could listen to. And that's in part, big part of why I started it. The other part of it is I work hard. I try to get it out there. And again, success has to be, I think, has to be defined. You look at people all the way on the other end of the continuum, like John Lee Dumas or Pat Flynn, or, Tim Ferriss. I think I was listening to him the other day, and he's literally hundreds of thousands of downloads.
Definitely.
What's the marker here? But I left I was able to leave my job, not without some bumps and bruises along the way. Yeah. But that's a good question. There's a lot of balls up in the air that go into this.
There are, and I think people don't always see that. And also, what advice do you have for people who are maybe thinking whether they have an idea worth pursuing, right? And a lot of therapists going, I hear this a lot lately, right? It's therapists who want a passive stream of income, and I'm laughing. Well, it's funny because I'm looking and I have this notification from Pat Flynn in the top right, just because I subscribed to his YouTube channel. So it's Pat Flynn, the smart passive income guy, telling me how to make passive income. So there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of like, everyone is starting a podcast right now, and everyone has a YouTube channel, and I think therapists are often trying to do a lot, or they're trying to do all these online business things without necessarily knowing why, or not necessarily getting the gains that they think they're going to get from them. So like, what would you say to those therapists who are maybe trying to do something outside of just sitting across from clients all day?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And I think, and again, I got to preface this. I'm not the expert here. I can only give you what I feel and know. And I think one of the first things is you have to ask yourself, what do you want out of it?
Right.
What is your goal? Do you want to leave your job and just do that, or do you want to have this other thing that you do? Do you want to create a couple bucks at the end of the month as a result of it? I think that's a really important question. What if you're going to start something like that, aside from just seeing clients? Why are you doing that? Is it a marketing thing?
Right.
All of which could be fine, but I think you've got to get really clear on that.
Yeah. Well, and are you going to enjoy doing it, right? Because I can't tell you how different this world is. There's something very different and something very, to me, something very like clean and almost easy at times when I go in and see my clients, and all I need to do there is sit with that client for those 50 minutes and do my best in that session and be focused. And then I transition to this other world of working online, and it's like setting up, email funnels, making sales calls, setting up a lead page. What's a Facebook pixel? And my Facebook ads are broken. And there's this whole webinar series I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? And like, it's just madness after a while. And it's so different from sitting there and going from, my one job is to help this person with their pain right now. And we're doing that through a 50-minute therapy session, a 50-minute dialogue, to this other world where there's 100 moving parts. And I will tell you my own experience, some of it can feel like going back to school again. You know what I mean? Because we didn't learn this stuff. Yeah. You didn't learn what a lead page was in graduate school. And now all of a sudden, especially if you don't have a tech background or marketing background, there's a steep learning curve, I think, that some folks don't see, or they just see, Guy has this podcast and it's great and he's able to leave his job, and I want to do that too, or I want passive income. So yeah, now I'm just rambling, but
well, no, you're hitting all the marks here. I mean, it's, I recently heard, really there is no really true passive income. I mean, it's a lot of work, and what's happened for me, and again, I'll share my own experience, is that there's been an identity shift.
Yes.
It's like, okay, so what am I? I was working, when I was working at this clinic for 5 years and I was working with these kids, I loved it. But there was something else that was digging at me, and it was this other major pillar of who I am, and it's kind of reaching out and bringing people together. And with that I'm kind of like, okay, Guy, what do you do? What is it you're doing now? Yeah. That's a kind of a thing that I'm going through, and it's a lot about owning who I am,
I like
so.
That.
Yeah, it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But I think if people want to I would encourage people to do it. Try it, but again, get really clear on why you're doing it.
That's right.
And you brought up there's all these moving pieces and it's it's challenging, but what the hell isn't, right?
For sure. And I think it's doing something with intention versus doing it because you think you should be doing it, or you see another therapist in your office starting a podcast and thinking that's going to be the thing to get me more clients, so I should do that, and I don't. So I do a lot of branding work with therapists, right? And I do a lot of kind of copywriting work lately and helping them develop taglines and compelling copy and clarifying their message to potential clients, right? And one thing that I have them do is I have them identify their mission statement as if you were a big company, right?
Right.
Because even the largest companies, when you get large, it's even more important to have a really clear mission, right? And for example, and we have to go beyond just what the product is. So your mission can't just be to do therapy or to help people, you have to kind of go one step further than that. So you think about a company like Facebook, right? And I've used this example before. The mission is not to create Facebook and create a place, where people can like and share and post. The mission is to make the world a more connected place, right? And so everything they do kind of comes back to that. So this is a roundabout way of explaining that I think for therapists and for entrepreneurs to think about what is your personal mission statement. That way it's going to be a lot more clear. It's going to be a lot clearer for yourself to go, am I on target? Am I not? Am I on target? Am I way off? Am I just chasing, shiny objects along the way? It's a hard question, but yeah.
I think it's a great question too, because it kind of dials in on their mission, but it also really kind of illuminates their own personality in a sense.
For sure.
What ignites you, and that can be really difficult because it asks you to kind of talk about things that though might make you different and unique and awesome, maybe you're not even aware of, A, or maybe you not too proud of, B, but it also, and that's something that I've been doing too. I think that's a good thing. The other piece of that is, following up on what you're talking about, a podcast might not be great for, Sally over there, yeah. And it might be doing something else, that's the other thing too. So anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are the challenges that you're facing now in your work, or what are some of the things that kind of like?
Well, you brought up the business thing. I mean, I didn't go to business school. Yeah. I have no business background. I have no marketing background. I have no sales background. Yeah. I have none of that stuff. I'm like, when I was commuting, that's how I got my education. I was listening to all these podcasts.
What were you listening to at the time?
Oh man, I was listening to John Lee Dumas, which was a big one. I mean, just to hear over and over and over and over again all these people from all different walks of life making it happen. I'm like, come on. Come on, everyone's not an Einstein.
Right.
I'm not an Einstein.
Right.
Something's got to give here, you know. But it just really empowers you to step up and take a chance. I mean, Pat Flynn and just, you know, all the podcasts I was listening to. I just found them so inspiring, and then I started reaching out to people on these podcasts, and you know, and just talking to them, and that too was really empowering too. And it just, for me, it's just taking action, just doing it. There's this one phrase. I mean, if you listen to these podcasts, all these phrases keep popping up again. You know, done is better than perfect.
Sure.
I love
all
that.
The time. Yep.
That's my mantra. You know, just get it out there, try it. And there's just a certain level of me trying to bring myself more and more into what I'm doing. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Huge.
And I'm coming into that, you know, just kind of just trying to be who the hell I am. And that's not always easy. Because you're online and you're on screen and blah 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 blah, and you know.
Yep.
So
yeah,
that's a big challenge.
So, my experience is that it's kind of like an hourglass in a way, because you take this inspiration from a lot of big players or a lot of people like John Lee Dumas, Pat Flynn, Tim Ferriss, and it's like, okay, they're doing something extraordinary, and so maybe you start there and you say, okay, I'm going to do this entrepreneur thing, and in my experience, sometimes we end up trying to look like these other people, or trying to, you know, emulate kind of what we see working for them. And then at some point, I think when you've been doing it for a little while, you start to really come into your own. And it's the same process of becoming a therapist, right? There's a time where you're sitting there and you feel really awkward and you can't believe that you're in the therapist chair all of a sudden, and you're sitting really stiff and you're like, holy shit, this is really happening. And it's the same thing with being an entrepreneur, right? At some point it might feel kind of stiff for a while. It might feel like, do I belong here? Right? Do I really belong here? How am I different? Where is my voice? And then at some point, I think you learn to kind of relax and you just go, you know, this is who I am, and that's ultimately what's going to work, and that's what's going to sell. You know, if we talk about sales, it's like,
right.
There's so much noise out there in the world, and there's so much data and information that if you are just adding more noise to the picture, people aren't really going to be compelled by it, right? So like you said, kind of giving yourself permission to just let go of these ideas of what you should be, or trying to emulate, you know, big players and stuff, and just going, I've just got to be me, you know. And that's really hard to do. That's really cliche, but it's really golden, right?
It is golden, and it is difficult to do, you know, and I won't deny it. Of course, you know, all those people you mentioned, you're like, oh my God. But the power of connecting is so vibrant and clear and authentic when you're able to just let down that damn wall and just be who you are. And it's interesting, you know, you brought up the therapist kind of entrepreneur parallel in a sense, and it is true. As a therapist, I know for myself, when I was in graduate school, I was like, again, I had gone back to school when I was 36. So I've been out for a while. I had been in therapy and loved it and got a lot out of it. And when I got to school, I knew I wanted to get into trauma.
Yeah.
And I was like, give me the book, give me the workshop. What's that specific conference that I need to go to that's going to make me a trauma therapist?
Yeah.
I wasn't giving honor to that other part that I was talking about, which was, you know, myself and who I was, and owning that. I wasn't bringing that to the equation. And as a result, I did go through this long kind of arduous process of learning how to own myself in that therapy setting. And that was a big learning experience for me too. So this process of, you know, being an entrepreneur and owning that is something that is just so important.
Yeah.
I love that topic.
Yeah, that's really valuable. So let me ask you this. So as we wrap up here, if there was one thing that you want therapists to know right now, what would it be?
The importance of owning who you are. The importance of owning who you are and the role that plays in the therapy, in the relationship. It's not so much, within the context of trauma, like, getting Bessel van der Kolk's book and turning to page 32 and getting that amazing intervention or whatever book. It's about you being able to be comfortable with yourself in that room with that person and being a real human being there. That is gold. That is, I think, one thing that I would say.
That's great stuff. Guy, I'm going to have you on the show again. We've got more to talk about and
I'd love to,
a lot of overlap. Awesome. So, man, I appreciate you being here. So how can people, what do you have going on right now, and how can people get in touch or follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, people can find me at thetraumatherapistproject.com. I have my podcast there. I have a membership site for new trauma clinicians, offer support and inspiration. And just hit me up there. I'd be happy to offer your listeners a discount on anything I have, so they can just say, oh, I heard you on John Clarke's podcast. Perfect. And I'll hook you guys up. So
awesome. Excellent. We'll include some links in the show notes as well to your different sites and stuff like that. So yeah, there you have it. Guy, thanks again for being here, man. And I'll see you next time.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Cheers.